Hey everybody, this is Aaron the Pedantic. So today, you're not seeing me, you're seeing perhaps footage of my Darkest Dungeon capture. I figured that it's actually probably less entertaining to look at my grisly face and probably a little more interesting to look at something else. But for those of you who just listen to these, then you're completely unaffected. So congratulations. Now, the big question today is the DM God. Why are we asking that question? A lot of people feel like they already have the answer. And, I would feel like you would have to say, yes, end of video. Da-da, da-da. No. So the reason that I'm asking the question isn't so much is the DM God, but how much of a God is the DM? Because ultimately we have power. We have tons and tons of power as the DM, but how far does that power go? And how much of it can we really use? How much of it do we use? The reason that the question is important to me is because there are, people that I respect who are trying to say that the DM in these impartial referee style that I enjoy, the old school play, that DM is actually kind of a tyrannical dictator of sorts. And I wanted to try and show that that's not really the case. And, I'm probably not going to change their mind. That's okay. It's perfectly okay. But at least, to some people that might be on the fence about it, I might be able to convince you on one side. So here's my thing. So what is being an impartial referee? I've already done a video on that, I'm pretty sure. But if I haven't, this will kind of touch on some of the tenets of it. So the DM's purview in an impartial old school game, to me, involves these top three things on this list. So the things that you want to be. You want to be the bricklayer, the judge, and the painter. So the bricklayer, as it sounds like, is just the one who's going to lay down the bricks. So they are going to build the world. That is their job, build the world. So this is something that happens before you ever show up at the table to play. Now, this is going to get kind of hairy because there is some parts where necessarily there can be some bricklaying after the fact that people will do. And there are some things that I would consider to not be bricklaying that actually involve filling in details, and I'll get to that. The judge is the next thing. So this is fairly obvious if you are familiar with Dungeon Crawl Classics. You've heard of the judge. The judge is the arbiter of the rules. The judge is going to dictate cause and effect. So the players are going to say what their intent is and what they're trying, and then the judge is going to say what the result is. What happens based on what the players do. So it's the DM's role is very reactive to what the players do, but in a different way than it would be in a new school game, where in a new school game, you are basically bound by the results of, whatever the rules dictate. The rules will say, for instance, they roll a bad thing happens, but it's up to you to decide what it is. And if they use such things as failing forward, then it's your job to invent things to keep the game going in a pleasant direction. It's not really so with the judge. With the judge, it is pure cause and effect. It is basically, the most obvious example is the saving throw, save or die. So in this case, did they roll high enough? No, then they failed and they're dead. It can also be as much as, trying to say, well, you're able to move this table over because you're, reasonably strong individuals. So you can flip the table over and etc. So you kind of dictate the laws of physics in the world. And this is especially important in games that don't spell that out. One of the things that people loved about 3rd edition was that it took this kind of power away from the DM so that things would be spelled out in just gratuitous detail so that, you don't have a situation where the players are feeling like they've been treated unfairly. The system will protect them. But the judge is going to have to make those decisions often on their own. So then you have the painter. So the painter is the one who is going to fill the canvas after the canvas has already been laid, you know. So they are going to put in the little details here and there. So my best example of what this would be on an impartial referee's side is going to be, let's say you have spiders in a dungeon, and you never wrote spiders down on the page. You know, you never wrote cobwebs down on the page. You know, there's going to be webbing here, webbing here. You didn't write that down, but you know that it would be there. That is what should be there based on the fact that you have enormous spiders that are inhabiting this place. And another thing might be that, you know, they go into a room and, you know, you're like, oh shit, there's a bunch of bodies here. You guys smell rotting flesh. So that is kind of what the painter's job is to do. Now, this can actually go a little bit further into a territory that some may say belongs to the bricklayer. And basically, if you start laying bricks after the fact, then you're getting into dangerous territory regarding being partial or not. But the time whenever you are still basically being a painter is when, let's say, you have a mechanism down, but you don't really think through all the implications of how the mechanism works. So you have to say, okay, this is how it would work. And let's say they want to interact with it, and they say, oh, you know, it works like I think it works like this. You know, I want to try this. So then you think, okay, now did the way that they describe it sound like how it should work? If the answer is no, then you provide clarification. You say, well, actually, you know, this is really how it looks like. And you try and make sure that you give them the appropriate hints so they know exactly what they're dealing with. And if the answer is yes, then, you know, then they get to interact with it. And what happens based on that is going to be cause and effect, basically. So bricklaying and painting can be used by people that are not being impartial whenever they use it during the game, but the intent is very, very important. The intent is what separates it. So if your intent is to paint things, you know, or to lay new bricks such that it provides something, you know, that is dramatic, something that is entertaining, something that is interesting, you know, that really will make the players feel certain ways, then you're going off into partial territory. And that's where things really start to get hairy. So I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. Now, these are the things that I would say if you were trying to run this kind of game that I'm talking about. So I'm not saying that this is the best way when I say don't be. I'm not saying that if you follow these ways, then you're doing wrong. I'm not saying that. You're just playing a different game. So the DM god should not be the dramatist. So the dramatist is kind of like what I was saying, where you're saying, okay, I can tell that the players look a little bit bored. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, you know, have a new character walk up to them, and they have this huge thing that, you know, and they're trying to like get the players to start talking about themselves and all this kind of stuff. And, you know, actually it turns out that it's their long lost sister, and, you know, they really care about them. And, you know, this is a huge dramatic moment, and it makes everybody feel really happy. And so that's a different style of game. It's a different style of game. It's whenever you're going into the partial territory, because you are not really trying to be faithful to the world you've created. You are laying the bricks as you play in order to be entertaining. And that is not being impartial. That is being partial. And if the goal is to be impartial, then you're not exercising this kind of god power, really. So the conductor. So the conductor. Now, let me be perfectly frank. Every DM has to frame things. So the conductor is going beyond that basic framing. So what I mean by that is that you have to provide a context for the players to play in. You can't just say, "What do you do?" Because they don't know what anything is. They don't know what's going on. They don't know where they're at. They don't know, you know, they don't know anything. They don't know anything. You have to give them a context. So you have to have a beginning. That's just purely, it's impossible to not have a beginning. Unless unless you're doing the dramatist shit. So this would be basically when you are saying, okay, what do you do? And well, where are we? Well, you're in a town, I guess. Oh, is there a tavern there? Yeah, sure, there would be a tavern. Okay, so you go to the tavern. What do we see there? And then you're like, okay, well, I want them to have something interesting to do, so I'm going to have, some people having a fight. There's a fight going on, and then somebody throws a glass at you, and just all this kind of stuff where you're just kind of making it up on the fly, because of the fact that you're just trying to be entertaining and you have nothing really planned. So this would be purely improvising. That would be the dramatist. The conductor is the opposite of that. The conductor has a beginning and a middle and an end. They have all that stuff planned for the characters. And this is, again, it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to do. It's just not partial, or it's not impartial. I can't believe I keep on fucking saying that. It's not impartial. It is basically going to involve either meta considerations where you are telling the players, look, this is what the story is going to be, and I need you to stick to it. Or you're going to employ illusionism or fudging or all kinds of things like that in order to keep them on the path that you have created, because you want them to go through your wonderful tale that you've crafted for them. Why is it that whenever I say things, I think back of other things? I forgot to mention another thing that the dramatist will do is they will fudge HP values in order to end combat quickly, or, to make it longer because it's more dramatic. So that's another kind of thing. I don't necessarily hate that, but I don't do it just because they earn the victories they earn, and they earn the failures that they earn. And so the conductor, they have all those things planned out. And typically in games that I run, I do the bricklaying and I give them a beginning, and then I let them decide where things go from there. I don't have anything developed beyond that, other than just, these are the big players in the world. These are the big problems in the world. And there's too many problems for me to have any idea what they're going to interact with. There's too many places for them to possibly go for me to decide, what anything is going to look like. So I guess theoretically, you could say that the impartial referee could create 100 different ends. 100 different ends, but they aren't filled in. They aren't thoroughly detailed. It would be nearly impossible to go through that kind of depth. Instead, what you do is you create timelines where you say, okay, if nothing has changed, this happens here, this happens at this time, this happens at this time. And, they have the opportunity to affect these things, but they don't have to. And so that is kind of how I would approach it from the impartial standpoint. The conductor is not going to want to do things that way. I have never had a game end in any way that I thought it would end. So I'll just say that. The Punisher. So the Punisher really is probably not the best term for it. The Punisher is also the rewarder. So it could be just called the provider. I should have changed that. But the Punisher is the meme. Rocks fall, everyone dies. I'm pissed off. I'm going to make sure you all fucking die, because then we can start over and I can have a little bit more control over your game or whatever. So don't do that. Don't do that. If it gets to that point, just say, listen, I'm not having fun with this. Can we try something different? But this is going to be the one who is, putting things in the world to either punish or reward the players. And so the rewards could be as simple as, well, I've had experience where, people have said, what kind of magic items would you like to have? And then, I'm like, well, I guess, I feel like my character would probably do well with something like this or whatever. It's kind of an awkward thing whenever it happens, and then then it's handed to you, as you play. It's just like, oh well, you get this, either like, your character turns a corner and then you see it, or something like that. Now before anybody flames, like terribly on this kind of DM or anything like that, I've done it before. I've done it before. I don't do it anymore. I don't do it anymore. I may do it if I'm running a game that is not impartial. And, so my 5th edition game that the last campaign I ran was a partial referee style. And that was because that was what they wanted. They wanted me to be the dramatist. They wanted me to be the one who's doing all that kind of stuff. And at that point, then, give them what they want if that's the kind of game you want to run. I wanted to run a game that made them happy. So that's what I did. So I'm not saying that, if you do this, you're terrible or anything like that. I'm just saying that is not impartial. And that impartial is kind of the standard that you should hold if you're not going to be the tyrannical, dictator DM that the other crowd is accusing you of being, the story crowd. So the punisher and the provider, they'll give you things that you like, or let's say that they will, let's say that they find out that you're really interested in your character having this kind of, story arc or whatever. So they're going to make sure that you have that kind of thing happen. Or let's say that you have been, you're searching somewhere, but there's really nothing that should be there. But then they're like, well, I'm just going to give it to them. I'm just going to put a little something in there because it's kind of sad that they've been digging around for so long. So I'm just going to give them something. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that because then that makes them wonder, well, when did I actually earn what I found? When did I really discover something? Really, a lot of this stuff just boils down to being honest with your players, being honest, being fair, being impartial. That is why I like to run games that way. Not everybody does, and that is perfectly fine. But I would just say that to people that accuse, referees, DMs like myself, of playing like a god, of, being the dictator, you don't really know exactly what's going on in my brain whenever I'm running these things. Because I am trying to make sure that they get exactly what they earn. And I am trying to be as faithful as possible. So it's not coming from a place of, exerting power. That's never the intention. That's never what I do. At this point, like I said, unless I'm running that kind of game that I just mentioned, where I have run that before, but it feels dirty. It feels dirty, and I only do it if that's what they want me to do. And this next time around, I'm going to ask them, look, do you want me to change things behind the scenes to make things more dramatic? Or do you want me to be faithful to what I'm presenting? And I really want them to think about that, because I don't think they think about that a lot. I think that a lot of DMs and referees out there, they are lying to their players in a lot of ways because they employ these kinds of tactics that I'm talking about. They employ them, and the players, they don't know any better. Maybe they do, because I have noticed these things before, but I don't say anything. I don't say anything about it because I don't want to ruin it for everybody else. But we can see the tricks. We can see the tricks, and it's just I don't have ultimate power. I answer to my players at the end. We all answer to our players at the end. This is all a contract. Now, technically, it's a hierarchy because the players don't get the same kind of say-so as they do in a story game, where they're able to help define reality or whatnot, especially if there's no GM. But even though we have that power, we're not going to use it because we will ruin things for the players. And I have yet to meet a dungeon master that I believed was going on a power trip. I've just never seen it. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I've never seen it. My experience has been, if you take the time to build a world and get a game ready for people, then you're trying to give them a good time. You are trying to provide a service in a way. And I just don't see how that can be tyrannical. I just don't see it. So that's the end of the video. It went a little longer than I was hoping for, but hopefully it was still interesting. So I hope you'll have a wonderful, wonderful week, and take care of yourself. Have a wonderful, awesome week. Bye-bye.